Good evening. We are very happy to welcome you on this special meeting with whom? Since you are here on the meeting, our guest needs no introduction. Peter Biziou. This will not be a very typical Q&A session. We don't have one film that we would like to talk to you about. Instead, we have gathered clips from 4 different films that our guest shot over the years. And we'll introduce briefly at the beginning the variety of his works. And later on, after each of the clips, you will get a chance to take part in a short Q&A referring to the specific film that the part of which we are going to present to you. And at the last part of the meeting, there will be the free Q&A session when you can ask whatever you would like to ask or share your comments perhaps. For the benefit of the time limits, we will not interpret this meeting into Polish, but I don't think it will be the problem for the audience gathered here. And well, that's pretty much it organizational-wise. So let's start with the montage of different films by Peter. Well, I do hope that this short show reel reminded you exactly how naughty this boy here was. And before we start with the clips and before your questions, let me ask just the first and very general one. What would you say are the most important things to be a good cinematographer?
Try and keep it simple, if you possibly can. Simple is always best. It's not always the easiest. I would think probably the next thing is learn to use your tools. Really practice a lot. You know, if you haven't got a movie camera, take still photographs. Get to the point where you feel really competent. You know, when you walk on a bigger and a bigger film set, if you've got that confidence, you take some control. People don't have to tell you what to do because you know what you're going to do. So learning over and over again how to use your tools, which is not just the camera and the technology, but it's printing your own material, trying different things, experimenting. And you develop a passion and a feel. It comes to you if you keep working at it. I think so. Mm-hmm. Mm.
Okay, thank you. Just let me make sure, can you all hear us good enough? No? Is it okay?
Loud enough?
Okay, that's great, thanks.
Good.
Okay, so a general answer to the general question. Is there something more you would like to ask, to share about that?
Well, not especially at the moment. I mean,
he has got a lot of notes.
I think it's enough to keep it simple and just work passionately and hard. You know, the more experience you get in, you start to find yourself getting into the beautiful unknown. As you get more experienced and you take more risk and you are prepared to swing with the changes, you find yourself doing things you didn't expect, but because you know your tools and your instruments so well, you can adapt very quickly and easily. It happens all the time, and I'm sure some of you know. the actors, the performance, the director will change their minds and you're turning around doing things differently. If you're competent, you just go with the flow. You know what you're doing. I don't think I can add too much more to this.
Sure, sure. We'll elaborate on that in practice, referring to certain clips, I think, and to the questions that you will ask. So let us start with the first clip from the Time Bandits. So, Peter, could you please start by reminding shortly what was this experience like for you?
It was wonderful. You know, working with Terry Gilliam is a real experience. The guy is fantastic at drawing. He has a beautiful imagination. You know when you work with Terry Gilliam, you're going into another world. And if you know your tools and you've done your homework, you can ride along with him, but every day comes different. People in the art department work almost all night sometimes to keep Terry happy. He arrives in the morning, he'll say, it's wonderful, but give me more, you know. He really drives. It's a beautiful energy he has. And it's a great pleasure to support him. When I first read the script, I was completely in, you know, except for one point. In the film, we have 5 different periods to go through. In the original script, there were 8 or 9 different periods. And with our small budget, I said, Terry, we're never going to do it all. And so I'm going to have to say no. Because I didn't want to confirm we could do it. He said, fine, I'll cut it all down. And he did. He got it down to 5, and it still works very well. In Terry's hands, everything is possible.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have 2 mics for you. So if you could just please raise your hand if you want to ask a question or share a comment, please do that, and somebody with the mic will give it to you. Is there already one? There is one over there. Thank you.
Hi there. So you talk about the art department having to work all night. How does that affect the camera department and your job when you've basically lit a whole scene that you've probably decided on, and then Terry will say, actually, what if we shoot it this way? And then, you know.
Usually it doesn't affect what I'm doing. You know, when I'm lighting a sort of key set, I will light it so that it has the atmosphere and the wide shot, and I light it with all the close-ups in mind as well. So once I've done the general atmosphere and mood of the set, I know that all I have to do is slide in 1 or 2 other auxiliary units to wrap the light around a bit more and make those changes. The all-time night work that the art department do is just more and more dressing, more and more effects that Terry Gilliam so loves. I'm really surprised when I come back in the morning. I don't have to make the big changes.
Right. Other questions?
I hope that was...
Yes, there is one over here. Could you please pass the mic to the gentleman over there? Yeah, just hand the mic to the audience. Thanks. Yeah, that will work. Thank you.
I just wonder, how long would a principal shooting, the production of such a project in 80s take? I mean, approximately how many weeks, how many days was the shooting process?
You mean for this particular Time Bandits?
Yes, exactly.
It was about 12 weeks. But then there were other little pickups. You know, we did all the studio work, and then we'd have to go to Tunisia and Morocco to do the scene with Sean Connery. playing with that big minotaur, etc. So there were other pickups on weeks and weeks later, and George Harrison, who was an investor in the film, was invited to put more money in so we could go and finish finish these other important sequences. Terry Gilliam is very persuasive. George Harrison was incredibly supportive, bless him. So,
and if I may ask, the prep?
Excuse me?
The prep, the preparation period, how long would that be?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing clearly.
The question is about the period, the preparation period. How long this preparation period took place?
Well, that was the point of telling or suggesting to Terry that 8 or 9 different periods was a big number. You have to change costumes and sets and everything. So by cutting it down to just 5 periods, we were able to squeeze it in.
The preparation period, how long did...
Oh, the preparation of the film. We did... Terry and I got to scout in Tunisia and Morocco for a few days. And you could see Terry disappearing over sand dunes and popping up here and there, everywhere. I mean, massive energy. Yeah. But, so it was a quick scout. He knew by photographic references and these things where he wanted to be.
Thank you very much. It's remarkable, because I would presume that it would have taken much longer than that back in the days. Thank you.
Thank you to you. And there is the gentleman over there. I thought we have 2 mics for the audience, so maybe you could take the upper part and you could... okay, thanks. Yeah, just share it. Thanks.
I wanted to ask, because I can see many theater inspirations in the movie, maybe also from Méliès or some other guys. And I was wondering, like, what was your conversation about the visual language with Terry? So, like, how did you come up with the specific ideas? Yeah.
I'm not hearing completely the question. Can you...
So the question is about in what ways did you, together with Terry Gilliam, establish the visual language, the visual ideas to convey what he meant? Because there are some inspirations being visible, perhaps from the theater, perhaps from Georges Méliès, some other inspirations.
You follow Terry Gilliam. He illustrates beautifully. He does wonderful drawings. You only have to look at them to know how the set is going to be. And he does very simple stickman storyboards and just elaborates occasionally with them a main beautiful drawing. The set designers, the production designer, bring it into reality. I'm always watching the construction going on so that I have an idea of the scale and size. And when I possibly can, I'm sneaking in equipment to try and speed up all of our lighting work. But we follow Terry, you know. It's, you don't, he trusts me to do the lighting, you know. It's, he knows I'm going to do a shaft of light if the set is demanding it. He knows my work before. I worked with him on Life of Brian, and we got on incredibly well together. Although he wasn't the director, the visual sense that Terry Gilliam had is really what made Life of Brian visually so interesting.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Or perhaps there's a comment you would like to share with us? So let me ask for a change, because this film is a combination of the humor and imagination of Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, who was also the co-writer of it.
Yes.
But also, it's as you have mentioned, it relates to certain periods of time, 5 periods of time. And I wondered what was more challenging for you, recreating those more or less realistically taken time periods, or doing some totally abstract fantasy parts, like when they are going through labyrinths, or somewhere in the space going through between the times? What was more challenging for you?
They were all equally challenging. With Terry, in the time you have, you just take each thing coming at you. They were all equally challenging. The more imaginary things, in a way, gives you more freedom, because you can do whatever you want. You know, in imaginary terms, you can just create.
Okay, thank you. I think we have the time for one last question in that part. Yes, it's for you.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing all your films and knowledge with us. My question is, if you are a perfectionist, and if so, when you will look back at your films, do you enjoy them, or do you think you would like to change something? I hope that makes sense.
I need some help.
Okay, so it seems like you are a perfectionist. So are you able to enjoy watching your films, or are you still constantly thinking about what could be improved?
That does happen from time to time, but I'm not a manic perfectionist. I always strive to do the best I can, but there comes a point where if you continue too much, you're burning production time, and most people aren't going to notice those last little things you're doing, so you have to know where the cut-off point is and get on with it. There's very few moments that I would ever want to reshoot. Usually we achieve as near as we can to what was wanted.
Okay, thank you. So we are asking you to speak a little louder when you are asking your questions. But now let's move on to the second clip coming from Mississippi Burning.
You should know I have a little difficulty with a pair of hearing aids here. It's pretty good though.
This film has, well, it won many awards. It received also 7 Oscar nominations and won 1 statuette for Peter Biziou for his cinematography. Can you remember what were particular challenges on the way with this project?
Can I remember what?
What were the challenges for you?
Alan Parker, for a start. He's a very strong-minded and a very good director. He challenges you all the time. Goes back to knowing your equipment, knowing your tools, and being very competent, and being able to stand there and say, I don't think so, or I think this could be more interesting, what do you think? You have to stand your ground with a strong-minded person like that. It was always a challenge, but because I kind of grew up with the man through advertising, I knew that he was always putting himself under great pressure. So you kind of get used to it and you treat it like water off a duck's back. You know he's under pressure, so you forgive him for the way he can push. The other challenges is because it's such a strong story and it's a very meaningful story. When you read the script, you know it's going to be very gutsy and bold. So I was determined to get a lot of scouting, and Alan and me and the camera operator, we were scouting for about 5 weeks ahead of shooting the film, which was very beneficial. We shot in Jackson, Mississippi, which is mostly flat, and you could say it's kind of boring being terribly flat. But we had to capture a few things that were typical to that area. Alan Parker desperately wanted to shoot it in Jackson, Mississippi, more or less where the bad deeds happened. And it's where we found the switchback with the cars coming up and down over the hills, and we managed to find a way to make it quite dramatic as a sort of opening sequence. So the challenge was on to make everything strong and bold. Fortunately, we had a good designer. We burnt a lot of wooden churches. They weren't actually churches, they were other wooden buildings that we'd put a spire on. And in America, you can put them onto low-loader trucks and put them in the locations you want. So, where are we?
Well, let's ask the questions. Well, let us give you the chance to ask some. Could you please turn on the lights for the audience? Thank you. There is already a question over here.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. I was just curious, with it being such an important film about a really hard subject, did you use any visual references, maybe historical photographs, to help inspire any compositions or even your lighting?
I'm sorry, are you asking me about what inspires me to get involved?
No, just if you, as part of designing the look,
Yes.
Maybe for even certain scenes or certain sequences, if you used any visual references like old photographs or things like that.
Yes, yes, to a degree. Alan would send me and some of the crew actual period photographs and references from the time to give us a feeling of it. For me, the best way I found to work is start from a natural look and then emphasize it in a way. You know, if it's a dramatic, heavy, moody scene, then I'll start thinking about daylight, but then I'll amplify that daylight and make it more contrasty, more shadowy, and go into the mood of the scene. If it's bright and joyous, and you can illuminate things more and more. It's always an emotional thing about how one's going to make it look. After some years of working with Eastman color, my brain is kind of made of Eastman color. You know, I barely need the light meter. I just know it's going to work, and even in the darkest area, you can still see some detail if we want to. You know, it's getting to know the material over and over. It's almost like driving a car, you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another question or a comment, perhaps? Yes, there is a gentleman over there.
Did you, obviously when we go into any place to film something for a certain amount of time, we get to know the community. Sometimes we have helpful people, sometimes we have resistance against that. Did you experience any kind of resistance to the subject matter, the film that you were doing, or vice versa?
Well, particularly on this film, Mississippi Burning, we knew the Ku Klux Klan were alive and well. There were several instances where overnight our sets would be painted with KKK. We weren't to know if it was just some silly hoodlums or if it was really the KKK. Where there was one scene in the film where Alan Parker had all of the locals as extras watching the police sifting in the water looking for traces of the body, and we had a live local audience on the bridge, and Alan Parker, the canny guy that he is, got one of our actors with a camera playing as a news reporter and started asking the local people if they thought that the bodies were in there. And one woman said, if they're in that there swamp, that's where they ought to be. And it was kind of shocking and hard. we didn't have any hard resistance, but you had the feeling it was still happening.
Okay, thank you.
All right. There is the lady over here.
Okay, so did you have any other idea for the title?
Did I have any other?
For the title? Do you mean?
Ideas. Czy on miał inne pomysły na to, jakby mógł nazwać ten film?
I'm sorry, no.
Well, did you have some other ideas for the title of the film? Do you think it might be titled something else? It's probably not for the cinematographer to decide, but still.
Yes, I think Alan would tell me, Peter, it's cleverly written here, and this is what we're going to do.
I'm sorry, I'm not from the cinematography stuff, so I just think you might know about it. So sorry, that was my mistake. Sorry.
No problem. We are also here, all of us, to learn. So it's something that you just got to know, right? Okay. There is the
if I do think, I could add to that, if I think I've got a good idea, I will offer it to a director. And in fact, I did say later on in the Mississippi burning thing with Alan, I had an alternative shot for him, and I said, I know it's cleverly written here, Alan, but what about, maybe we could do this or that? And he did it. He didn't thank me too much, but he just got on with it.
Thank you so much.
Those things happen, you know. So it's worth speaking up. If you've got an idea, and if you know what you're talking about, it's a good chance.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question up there.
Do you remember the hardest shooting day during that production?
Do you remember the hardest shooting day during this production?
In the Mississippi, the hardest shooting day? Yes. Well, the nighttime shoots were particularly difficult. You know, when you see that shot of the cars streaming around the lake and reflecting in the lake. When we scouted that location, I suggested to Alan that it would be particularly interesting to use that and put lots and lots of fuller's earth down to make the dust kick up. But trying to control a director who is going to keep trying different shots and angles and light it, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So I had to get one giant crane and put a monster big light up there and backlight the whole lake. And it was fabulous because it was the right time of the year. We got a lovely mist rising off the lake and everything was working. And I just said to Alan, that's all we're going to do tonight. You know, you can shoot this way, you can shoot that way. Try and use it well. It was such a big setup. It would have taken hours to move the crane and reset. So things like that are very tough. You just have to hope and pray you can keep everyone using what's available. The nighttime scenes there were particularly difficult.
Okay, thank you. There is the gentleman over there, and the next question will be from you, okay?
Yeah, so this film was shot like 40 years ago, and film language evolved so much in these 40 years. So if you would shot this film tomorrow, what will you do differently these days?
Well, it would be a lot simpler, actually, because you have wonderful, wonderful digital cameras that have an extraordinary capture.
I mean, not only the light, but the camera move and the whole film language.
I wouldn't change a lot. The technology is very different, so one could use much smaller lighting units. Now you can float like a balloon light in the air and do some very interesting stuff in forests. I wouldn't change the approach, but the equipment would be lighter, more sensitive, and in some ways easier, but you still have to use it in the most careful, creative way you can, you know. I'm not sure if I'm really answering the question.
Yeah, it is.
Good.
We saw a lot of scenes that were shot at night. Do you have something like a typical way to setting up your light, or is it basically from scratch every single time?
The last part I didn't hear.
Do you have some typical solutions that you use when lighting the scenes, or are you inventing them each time anew?
Yes, well, you have a whole assortment of possibilities, and you utilize, it's maybe getting back to the idea of keeping it simple. When you take on a production, when I read a script and I like the script and I say yes, I then read the script several times over, breaking it down, trying to find maybe 2 specific looks for nighttime work, so that all the electricians know the kind of way we're doing it. That after we've lit 1 or 2 nighttime scenes, they can almost preempt me because we're using a similar technique throughout. You know, when we used the big crane to light that lake, we also used the big crane to light the church that you saw being lit up. And the guys, the electricians, they know that's what I'm going to do. When we positioned that church, we had a hillside way up on one side. They knew they just had to get the crane on top of that hill somehow and put the big light on it, and it just lit everything. Just about, not even 1.4, it was 1.1 or 2, you know, but enough to have a minimal exposure, and then let the flames take over, you know.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for this part. We'll get to the next clip, which comes from Richard III. So what would be your comments on that experience?
Well, it was a great experience. It was a more theatrical, it was a theatrical thing on film, essentially. You can imagine bringing a Shakespeare story up to modern times. With Ian McKellen, it was a joy for me to treat it like theatre on film. It gave me more license to play. You know, like when you see briefly in the morgue where the woman is mourning her lost man. It was fun for me to put some really smooth white smoke in the whole area. It sort of made it feel as if it was cold, and it's a bit theatric, but I felt it gave it a sense of cold and doomy, you know.
Would you say you have struggled in a way to make it more cinematic, to move a bit away from the conventional ways of portraying theater plays, since you have had all the cinematic tools in your gestures?
Well, for me, it was very simple. Richard Longcrane, the director, is technically very proficient. He understands all the lenses and the way we can move the camera. He's very efficient. And then with Ian McKellen, is such a master of Shakespeare and theatrical works. Together they wrote everything and they kind of designed everything. All of the buildings and architecture we would use were kind of spear-like, you know, that sort of Nazi construction. And when we couldn't find it, we would make things happen and look like that. For me, all I was really doing was, as I said before, just dramatizing what would be a real look and then making it a little stronger, a little more contrasty, just to give it that mean edge, not to take over anything, but just emphasize the sort of hardness and the toughness of the story at times. Occasionally taking real license, like in the morgue, puffing smoke everywhere and making it feel especially cold.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's light up the audience, please. Is there a question already? Yes, there is one up there.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. My question is about the script, because you know, we have these scripts which can be very detailed in terms of imagery, and it's very well prepared even in the words for the DOP. And on the other hand, we can have scripts which are quite which can be just composed from the dialogues and no much instruction for the cinematography. And my question is, which one is your favorite? How do you like your script?
So what do you prefer when you receive a script? One that is full of details that are beneficial for you as a cinematographer, or something that remains more for you to decide? What should there be in the cinematography?
When I read the script, I want it to really turn me on. I want it to engage me. It's like when you're a child and your parents turn at page 1, page 2, page 3, and you're into this story. If I read a script and by page 10 I'm getting slightly impatient that it's not drawing me in, by page 20 or 30, I'm almost giving up, but I follow through to see if there is enough of a story there that will change. But generally, all of the films I've worked on have been scripts that I have loved emotionally. I was intrigued with them. And when it takes me like that, I'll read it again, a second and third time, and look at the treatment. Have I got something to offer this story? You know, I wouldn't get involved unless I could sit in the room with the director and tell him that, or her, that I love this story and I've got a treatment and I'm confident. I wouldn't want to do it if I was just doing a job's worth, you know, just bang some light in, get the exposure. That wouldn't do it for me.
Does it mean that if the script is very precise in what it should like when we see it being shot, then it turns you down? I mean, do you prefer to have a lot of additional information in the script for you? In what way to shoot it?
Not especially if the story is there. If it's cleverly written, if there's a real good tale going on, you can preconceive as you're reading. You know, when you're reading a book, you can preconceive the atmosphere, the creepiness or the joy, and it has to be in the story. It's up to us all to try and put the images to it. Frankly, I think most people's imagination is better than what we can do. You know, when you read a book, you can imagine any kind of interpretation. So the difficult part is making it visual and giving it a sound and an image.
Okay. Another question. There is one over here.
Hello, thank you for sharing your high-quality experience with us. My question to you is, does your work affect your situation, maybe also at home, your lighting, how you decorate your home, and maybe also that you sit at home and you visualize like, oh, this was great, but the way I have it here, maybe I should point it also on set. Like, do you have a reflection between work and home situation, sometimes maybe dreams, that you feel like inspired of your lighting?
I think I'm understanding you're asking me if the film work I do affects my private time and life.
Yeah, and how do you decorate your home, for example, and the other way around as well?
When I'm involved in a film, it's 24/7. It's a complete commitment. Once I've read a script I like and met the director and we're on the same page, it's 24/7. It's a complete commitment. My friends at home, once I've said yes to a film script, they sort of wave goodbye for 3 or 4 months. You know, it's like that. It doesn't change anything that much. I long to get back to my friends and the little life I have.
But are you using the lights that you use on the film set sometimes to inspire you with the lighting at your home, or the other way around?
No, domestic lighting I'm hopeless at.
And the technology available is a bit different, I imagine.
You know, I live very modestly, privately. I don't have big overheads. I've got a few lighting units in my apartment, but they're just effective and practical.
Thank you so much.
And there is another question over here.
First of all, thank you very much for everything. And I wanted to ask like technical kind of a question. So obviously, I think that in this film you were using multi-cameras because like stuff with the tank and explosion in the an explosion. Okay, so do you have like some tips, ideas how to compose multi-cameras?
Well, the main question is tips about framing.
About using multiple cameras, how to set them up.
I don't particularly like multiple cameras very much. There are times when it's very beneficial, when it's perhaps tricky or dangerous. So you limit the amount of takes you have to take. But having one camera, I've always felt is best for performance, when everything plays for that camera. I've always enjoyed trying to do everything in camera as well. It's part of the challenge. We know now we have wonderful post-production, which is very expensive. Are we doing Truman Show? Yeah, yes, you'll see in Truman Show there's a sequence, I think we've got it in the edit, where Christoph, they've lost Truman. He's disappeared somewhere and they've lost him, and he just orders the sun to come up. And the production was expecting to do that in post-production, but with our wonderful, wonderful rigging team, they were just marvelous. We actually rigged it so that we could lift up a whole bar of fantastically bright lights. And we did the sun up for real, and you could see the sunlight arriving over everybody. It saved a fortune in post-production. You would have had to rotoscoped and done all sorts of complex work. I was very pleased with that.
Okay.
All in camera.
We are almost at the Truman Show, but there is one last question that somebody here you wanted to ask, right? Down here, if you could. Sorry, the gentleman was fast here.
What happened when you had to shoot commercial projects? If you ever shot commercial projects, you had the same passion or commitment, even if they were feature films?
Not the same passion. For me, commercials were like paid university. I learned a lot shooting commercials. You know, I started very young. I was very fortunate with the people I was meeting. When I started becoming a lighting cameraman, there were a lot of very good photographers who wanted to move into the advertising industry, the moving image. And when they would join with the commercial making company, they didn't have union tickets, they didn't know about the motion camera and all of the equipment. But because I was so keen, they would ask me to stand with them and share everything. Like that, I got to work with photographers who had a beautiful talent, you know, a bit like Irving Penn. A lot of photographers copy Irving Penn, the simple, beautiful, directional soft light, you know, and play with that. And these guys were masters at it. At a very early age, I was given the chance to share that responsibility. So that's why I call it paid university. And then they had big budgets. They wanted more and more and more, and you had to get cleverer and cleverer. So you would take risks and do all sorts of stuff with their money, you know. But it wasn't the same passion. It was always I wanted to do things as best as I can, you know.
Okay, so let's see one more clip of the feature productions, the Truman Show. Well, somebody told that cinema is the art of telling lies or using lies to tell the truth. In this case, our main character is gradually realizing how fake his world is. So my question is, how were you, in what ways were you trying with Peter Weir to capture that sort of line between reality and the feeling of it being fake? So how realistic and how fake did you try to create this web?
It was a very fine line. When I read the script, I loved it. It was intelligent and it was slightly ahead of its time. I mean, it's what, 25 years ago or maybe a bit longer. And then there weren't little lipstick cameras and magic little boxes and stuff. So Peter Weir and Andrew Nichols, who wrote the story, spent nearly a year rewriting it into the form that I read. And I was just so intrigued about the whole concept. And reading it over and over again, I came up with almost like a sound bite. When I went in to meet Peter Weir for the first time, he told me, we've got the set design working, we found a wonderful location, but we haven't quite got round to the treatment. And I said to him, we're going to shoot surveillance that no one has ever seen, you know. And that just made Peter sit there and go, well, go on, yes, you know. And we had to recreate everything. When Truman was driving his car around and talking to the radio and stuff like that, I had to make the production buy several cars, which they weren't too happy about. And we stripped out the whole engine, and they said, why, what are you doing? I said, well, we've got a big Panavision camera with a 1,000-foot magazine and a great big lens that we're going to push up the steering wheel into Truman's face. And we're going to put a little maquette around the lens and make believe we're inside the radio. So it's that we started to do all the time. We created all of these hidden cameras that didn't exist, but we invented them, you know.
I think that's a good example of a film that would be made differently nowadays, referring to your previous question, right?
Absolutely. Now got all the little cameras and lenses. Well, you see it every day now.
All right. So once again, let's hear it from the audience. There is a question already here.
It was a lot of fun doing all of that. It really was.
Hello, thank you for being here. I was just wondering, a lot of your productions, you've got a lot of water and fire. What's it like working with elements that aren't as easy to control?
Working with water?
And fire.
And fire.
How easy or difficult it was?
It definitely adds a difficult factor, definitely. Water and boats and cameras, you have to take so much more care. It's difficult planning. For drowning Truman in his boat and turning it over, there's a massive hydraulic rig underneath, so we can just tip it over, tip it back, rehearse, do this, do that. There's great big water tanks high up on special machine construction, and sort of wave dumpers. You dump hundreds and hundreds of gallons all at once that hit a curve at the bottom and tip up into a wave. That's what went over Truman's boat. It's loads and loads of effects. Loads and loads of equipment are involved. And also, we were in the big water tank at Universal Studios in Los Angeles. Bright sunlight all the time. I had to build an enormous rig suspended from a crane to diffuse the sunlight so that it could be sort of believable as a storm.
Once again, referring to this question, because you had a lot to do with water in this production, while with Mississippi Burning you dealt with fire. Which of them would be, you would say, more challenging technically wise?
Yes, in a different way. Every building that we set fire to, we had control, we had gas pipes everywhere, so you could do a preliminary start of the burn, move your cameras around, get enough pickup shots, and then just let the building go. What I did, we did have 4 cameras photographing that, because you can't repeat it, and I had a little radio control to each camera assistant, and as the flames burnt higher and higher, I had them stopping down slowly and slowly, closing the aperture. We started shooting at around 2, F2, T2, and we finished up between 11 and 16, you know, as the flames were really getting bright. And I didn't want them to burn out, you know, when you see flames photographed and they're just white, there's nothing there. We needed to see all the beautiful colors and the reds and yellows. It has so much more feeling, especially with the lovely music over it.
Okay. Another question up there, the gentleman, that 3 gentlemen all together, I would say. Yeah, but you will be the next one.
Truman is one of my all-time favorites still. I think it was very ingenious and amazing to hear how you ended up shooting all those supposedly hidden cameras. How much of the Truman world was actually a set, and how much was already, I don't know if there's places in America that, well, sometimes they do look like they're sets, but how much of the whole actual Truman world was built for the film?
I think I heard most of it. I have such difficulty. Peter Weir's wife found the most marvelous location. It was called Seaside, Sea View, and it was a ready-made set piece. There was one owner who auctioned off all of the properties in his land, but everyone who bought a property, an allotment, had to use a certain range of architectural design. They could do any which way with it, but they had to use the stock materials. And when Peter's wife showed us the photographs, it looked like a film set. It looked like it was made for this movie. In those days, they were just beginning to get the digital power and expertise to raise the height of some of the buildings. You know, they could put several more stories on to give us a city centre feel. But mostly it all existed. It gave me a real problem because all of the buildings were very pale, almost white, and we've got this super intense sunlight every day and blue sky. And you know, when you have got a lot of blue sky, it makes all of the shadows go blue. If you didn't fill, you know, under Jim Carrey's eyes, if you didn't fill his face with a decent amount of fill, the shadows would go bluish. It wouldn't be nice at all. So there was a whole other set of problems about that location. It worked to advantage in the end. I found a way to bounce back all of the sunlight right down the street, and it sort of worked. It meant we could shoot a wide shot in the street, we could go straight in for a close-up, because all the fill light, it was the sunlight being bounced back. It was a beautiful balance. It took me where I'd not been before.
Amazing, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So were there a lot of sets built either way? So I guess for the interiors you have used the sets, or were those buildings used as well for the interiors?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Because the question was basically how much was it built, how much did you use the real-life locations? So were you using the locations as well for the interiors?
We did. We used most of the real interiors as well. The buildings were nicely designed. It gave me some difficulty. There were one or two rooms and sets that we used that we had to build because I needed one wall taken away, and you couldn't do that to someone's private property.
Usually, yeah. All right, there's the question down here.
Hi. I just wondered if it was possible to ask a question about In the Name of the Father. So it was shown there, but I finally I've seen it several times, but finally got to see it in the cinema yesterday, and it still holds a tremendous amount of power and is a very important film. But I was curious about what Belfast was like when you were actually shooting there. So how you were received when you were actually filming there, what it was actually like at that time, because I suppose to give context to the room, there was a good few years off the peace process, and Neil Jordan, who would make Michael Collins 3 years later, was receiving death threats at that time.
Needing some help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you were shooting In the Name of the Father,
yes,
and you shot it in Dublin,
Belfast.
What was Belfast? So what was your experience like making it not long after Nick Jordan shot Michael Collins, for example, right? So
it was just before.
It was before.
Yeah.
I haven't
It was before the peace process.
Did Michael Collins come after In the Name of the Father?
It did, yeah.
Yes, yes. I had a whale of a time working with Jim Sheridan on In the Name of the Father. He's a gorgeous director. He's a man with a big heart. He promised me when we'd read the script, I said, if I'm going to get involved in this, I need to know it's true. He crossed his heart and told me it's all true. He spent ages with the family, etc. And the whole Irish crew were excellent to work with.
But was the experience with the Belfast and I imagine the people in Belfast, their reactions to the production, did you experience any of the tensions, I imagine?
Oh yes.
Political tensions? Or
yes. the Irish people, they might not be terribly vocal these days, but they feel a lot of emotion. And you do feel it. Mm.
But when you were shooting In the Name of the Father, did that tension and emotions of the Irish people somehow influence your work? Or did you feel that there is the sort of social pressure on when you were shooting this film?
I got that from the director, from Jim Sheridan, and from Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, you couldn't miss it. Daniel's performance was so intense, and Peter Postlethwaite as well. I wasn't moved by the social structure around. We were a hard-working crew making a film, you know. It was in the script, and it was Jim Sheridan, the director, it was his passion that drove the thing along. Mm.
Okay. Let's move on with another question. There are gentlemen up there, yes?
Hiya. You've done some pretty epic films with some very heavy themes. I was wondering if you could share with us your process when you receive a script, how you work with the director to create a look and the technical script.
So, since you have worked on a number of films that have heavy themes, do you have some standard way of procedure when you communicate with the director about the visual language? How do you have some rules, for example, that you follow usually when discussing the visual language with the director?
Yes, it's to, when we're scouting, is to listen very well and to always ask for rehearsals if they will. You let each subject, each film guide you what the treatment's going to be. I remember In the Name of the Father, Jim Sheridan had a really good camera operator, a local Irish operator, and we were shooting in the prison, in the jail. And first thing in the morning, he'd laid a track right across a whole area, etc. And I said, why are we laying the track like this? He said, well, we're going to tell them to go from here to there to there. And I said, don't do it. I said, let's let the actors come in and show us what they're going to do. Then you can lay a track somewhere. If you just can't do that, it would be wrong. You've got to let the story tell you what to do.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Yes, over here.
Hello. In the Name of the Father is a beautiful film. Also, The Truman Show is so iconic, and I feel like it was prophetic back in the day. But I had a question about working with Jim Carrey, knowing how big of a personality he is. Did he ever interact with you or the crew in such a way that you changed maybe how you were filming sometimes, or maybe changed the script as a reaction to how he was interacting with you all?
And you're really asking me how was it working with Jim Carrey?
Yes, I guess so.
Yes. I thought it was great. He's a very talented guy. He studies everyone. He gets all of his funny faces and his funny moves by studying other people. There was one instance early on in the shoot which gave Peter Weir a difficult time, and it was Jim Carrey had already worked out how he was going to mow the lawn, you know, and there was a typical rotary little lawnmower with a hoop of a handle around it. And we all turned up, and we set up some fill light and the usual sort of things, and 3 cameras, because we didn't know quite what Jim was going to do. And he went about doing what Jim Carrey does. You know, he was jiving with the lawnmower, cutting hedges with it. He was doing wonderful stuff. It was incredibly funny. But it wasn't Truman. It was Jim Carrey doing a stand-up act. So Peter Weir realized that he wasn't going to start directing Jim Carrey every movie he made. Peter Weir sacrificed his whole day and made Jim Carrey watch the dailies the next morning. And he and Jim I was sitting behind them, they were looking at each other like this. And Jim said, "It's not Truman." Peter said, "Thank you." Yeah, and it was worth losing a whole day because it would be really hard to direct that talented Jim Carrey and turn him away, you know. I thought Peter's strategy was, he handled it wonderfully.
That's genius, thank you.
Did you have some situation difficult for you with Jim Carrey in terms of him trying to influence the way you shoot?
No. In fact, Jim Carrey was complimentary. He thought I was a good DP and I should carry on doing what I'm doing. In fact, he even copied my little hat. I used to wear a little peak cap. It was a tartan crisscross thing. And one day he turned up on the set with the same thing, and he used it in the film. He loved it. He copies everyone. He borrows from everybody.
Thank you. Another question from the gentleman over here.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to know, how do you feel with the deep of field of these days, of the films these days that works at 2T stop, wide open stops?
Sorry, how I feel about what?
Could you please repeat that? I have the problem of understanding what you mean.
It's my English, Argentinian English. How do you feel of the films with a lot of deep of field these days? Because in the old times, maybe you use 5.6 or 4T stop, and these days maybe you have a short deep of field on largest sensors. And
so you're relating to now everybody, it's very fashionable to shoot wide open for a shallow depth of field. It makes it much more difficult for the first assistant. In fact, I really praise good first assistants. They have one of the most nervous jobs on the whole business. You know, we're all doing wonders, shooting wide open and getting this lovely look, but the assistants are really going through it.
And do you like?
Oh yes, I mean we used to do it. We didn't have such fast lenses, but if I could shoot, if a lens could support shooting at T2 wide open, if the quality was good, I would do it. But I would always say to my assistant, you know, I would always calculate what the risk factor was. If we were on 100 mil and tracking a moving person, I'd say it's 6 to 1. You know, we could do 6 takes and get 1 right, and I'd make the director aware of it. So the assistant knew he wasn't at risk. You know, I would always say, just look at me and I'll know whether you got it or not. You have to protect the camera crew when you're working with such fine moments. It's very difficult.
Okay. Another question or comment, perhaps? We have just time for 1 or 2 more. So if there's something that pops into your mind, yes, there's the gentleman up there.
I'm not sure if you have shot a lot in digital cinema, in digital cameras.
No, I haven't.
Not at all?
No. The last few films I did, I always managed to shoot it on film. A couple of times I would ask the production to tell me what the budget was for their whole digital layout, and I'd say, well, I can do that on film easily. I'll just print the master shot for the look, and any difficult moments, you know, when you're doing extreme close-ups, you have one eye sharp and the other one soft when you're shooting wide open. So I would print any tricky close-up shots or moments that the crew need to know that they've done well. and I cut the printing down almost in half, and matched the digital budget completely. There was no problem. My brain is made like Eastman Color, but in the earlier days, the digital wasn't as good as it is now. You know, it was too sharp, it was too brittle, it looked like TV newsreel. I like the organics of film emulsion.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we have another question somewhere over here. There was somebody. Yeah, the gentleman over here.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this. We're having an absolute blast. My question is, do you think with the modern cinematographers, this generation of cinematographers, do you think there's something we have lost? Maybe we have gone a little bit more style over substance and going with crazy some stylistic choices, and we have lost a little bit of style. No, substance, I mean. Yeah.
No, I don't lament any loss, because there are enough up-and-coming people with the new technology, and they're using it very well. I mean, it's super easy now with the fast-gain digital camera to shoot in candlelight with ordinary household practical lights. Some people are just waving the camera around, and you can sense it's lazy. But there are people who are using it very, very well too. So we wait and see, you know.
Thank you so much.
All right, is there one more, let's say, one final question? There is one over here.
So you talked about, well, thank you very much. Yes. You talked about like taking care of your camera team, and how is your relationship with them before, like in prep and during the preparation of the projects, like for example with the camera operator? I think it's very important because it's like your I don't know, it's really important. So how is for you to relationship?
I treat the camera crew as really important. I spent many years being a first assistant focus puller, so I know all about it. You know, I went through all the stages, and I really liked it. I was a very good focus puller, so I know. Then, when I first started, we used to tell the DP what aperture we needed to do a two-shot, what depth of field we needed. We used to say to the DP, 5.6 or 6.3, sir, would ensure you've got a good depth of field split. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. You know, the assistant just has to go for it. I always protect them. And in pre-production, I always fight for an extra week or more to check the equipment, to do lens tests, etc. Very often they're not given enough time to do the thorough work.
And but like the creative part, like do you share a lot with them about your references or the look of the film?
If they've got good questions, I'll tell them everything I know and what's happening, you know. I might be using a light fog filter or almost invisible diffusion. You know, I used to use the Harrison diffusion filters. They were very subtle, and they were just fine. You couldn't tell that they were working, but they would help the cosmetics and those sort of things. Any assistant who asked questions got a good answer why, yeah. It would be wrong to be too protective. You've got to pass things on.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's pretty much it. I'm happy that that question was the last one, because I feel like Camerimage Festival is all about passing the information, passing the knowledge, sharing it. So we are very happy to have you here and being able to learn from you. Thank you very much to Peter Biziou and to all the audience members.